In this video, I want to talk about rhetorical analysis. So analysis literally means, cutting into little bits. It's an interesting word. If you want to look it up online and look at its word root, it has to talk. It has to do with loosening up and unraveling, if you will, or peeling back all the layers, finding the elemental points of something. So when you analyze something, you're really trying to see the gears that make it work. You're trying to look at all the different parts that make the whole function. And when it comes to, say, content analysis or argumentative analysis or even literary analysis to some extent, but so what I'm getting at is sometimes you can use analysis to look at what the text is actually saying, like its logic, its information. Is the data correct? If the data is correct, and if it was gotten the right way, the methodology is correct. Are the conclusions correct? There's a lot of logic and science and math that can go into certain articles, essays, reports, experiment reports, books, and you can sit and you can analyze, the actual substance of the thing, what the thing is saying. So there's if you want to think of, a book, say, as having its core essential part, being the text and what the text is saying, then that could be your substance of the book, right? And or of an essay, the substance, what's it actually trying to say, and its points and its ideas, right? And you can analyze that, and we'll do that a little later in the course, okay? But every text comes in some sort of genre or format or structure. A poem, a song, a movie, a documentary, a YouTube video, a website, a homemade video, a podcast, essays, newspaper articles, opinion pieces, magazine articles, academic journal articles. The list goes on. Billboards, many. When we create a text, we put the message into some sort of form, okay, some sort of format, some sort of fixed thing, and then we give it to the audience. So a rhetorical analysis is more you're analyzing, you're trying to figure out how the not necessarily the substance of a text, but how its form, how some of the other elements that are there, say humor or seriousness or the type of language, could be very colloquial language. Colloquial language is language you might use just in conversation with a friend, very informal. Could be slang, it could be formal, and elevated language. It could be all sorts of stuff, and the speed of delivery, the way the person looks, the way they're presenting things, all of that plays a part in how the message is received. So when you do rhetorical analysis, you obviously have to know what the text is saying. You can't really just never know what the text is saying or what the song is saying or what the movie or the documentary is saying. You got to know the content, but the focus is a little bit more on what are the other moving parts here, and how does it affect the audience? The audience is going to be huge. We'll get to this chart in a little bit, but the audience is huge in rhetorical analysis. So think of a movie that you might have watched recently where, say, I don't know, the music created a certain mood in you or set up certain expectations. Well, we're getting close to, at the time I'm making the video, it's getting close to Halloween, so, whatever, Netflix is trying to get you to watch some scary movie marathon or something, and the music, and this goes back to two very important movies in our past, American film, Jaws, the bum 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 bum, and the way that music affected the audience. They literally screamed during the first viewings of that film. way back when. If you haven't seen Jaws, you should, just to know the history of film. And this is one of the iconic films that you kind of got to see. But and then Psycho by Hitchcock, Alfred Hitchcock, and the way that they developed the score for that, the music for that, and the way that it radically shifted tone and speed when the famous shower scene. If you can find this on YouTube, you can see the shower scene in Psycho, and you can hear the music. So these are examples everyone can understand and easy to come up with, and they illustrate the rhetorical elements. Okay, the I don't want to call them extra textual. They're part of the text, but they are the music, the lighting, the speed of something can affect, right, how the audience receives the content. Okay, so when you do rhetorical analysis, you're trying to think, you're trying to watch an author. In this case, we're going to work with an essay, right? You're trying to watch what the author is doing to well, we're going to use an essay for an example. You'll actually be working with something else, but you're trying to look at the elements and the techniques the author is putting on top of his message. He's wrapping the message up in this, so she's including this in there, and then she's delivering the whole package to the audience. But that extra layer, or the envelope, also has an effect on the audience. And when you do a rhetorical analysis, you're trying to understand how that envelope works, not just the words themselves, but the way the message is packaged, if you will. Okay, so advertisers know this. For example, these days, if you want to take a quick look online to see how advertising works through influencers, I think I saw an article just recently about mental health and how some of the drug companies are reaching out to influencers and asking them to make taking antidepressants, and you're, cool. So the influencers are with, all sorts of techniques, trying to make it cool, if you will, now for everyone to take their meds, and or people that need to. And so that's a rhetorical strategy. You see what I'm saying? Because another way to do it is just write up the information on a piece of paper and mail it to everyone that is on this medication, and they get the information, don't they? Yeah, but will they ever read it? Do you read that stuff that comes in the mail? That's not the right rhetorical approach. You see what I'm saying? So to take Super Bowl, ads, the setting is very powerful, and so much so that these ads go, I don't know what the current price is, but I think it's like $6 million for 30 seconds. $6 million. You should check me on that. That's just a number I think I heard, but just millions of dollars for sure, right? And they know they have your attention. They know they have a certain audience's attention. They know, ask yourself, well, what do they know about the audience watching the Super Bowl? And they should know quite a bit. What are they drinking? What are they thinking? What are they doing? The people that love football and are going to watch the Super Bowl, what other likes and attitudes do they have? And how does this commercial address that? And, so Super Bowl commercials will try to fit that rhetorical space and try to do things through humor or through, I don't know, but it's not just the delivery of the information. That's one thing. But then it's the style and the approach, the devices that wrap it up. That is the focus of a rhetorical analysis, okay? Now, you got to start thinking about your audience, now how the audience is going to receive this piece of information, okay? And there are a lot of ways to think about audiences, but this is a simple chart that it doesn't cover everything, but it's just one chart to help you think about this. And it's actually kind of useful if you can remember this chart down the line when you give a speech, or when you're writing a letter, or writing an email, giving a report, somewhere. If you remember this, sometimes it'll help you design this thing. So, from one dimension of the grid here looks at audience's attitude to your topic, whatever the topic is, topic X, whatever. What's their attitude toward that? Are they sympathetic, disinterested? That means they're neutral. To be disinterested doesn't mean that you don't care about something, or don't you find it boring. That's the better way to put it. To be disinterested is not the same as being boring. To be disinterested in something is to have a neutral stance toward it. It usually relates to core philosophical, religious, ethical beliefs and events that can be controversial because people tend to disagree or agree about them, and you might just be neutral. Okay. Sympathetic, they're on your side. Disinterested, they don't know which way to go. Maybe your side, maybe the other side. Hostile, they're against your side. Okay. So if you have to speak to an audience, you might want to think in terms of, well, how do you think they feel towards your topic? Sometimes it's all a mix and you really can't tell, but sometimes you can. And if you can tell, you ought to remember that. And then you need to look at your audience in terms of their information that they already have. Are they informed? Are they uninformed? So this middle grid here on this dimension and this one sort of they don't know enough yet to pick a side. So disinterested or uninformed, and now they're not exactly equivalent. We'll talk about that later. Or maybe the audience is misinformed. They just have the wrong information. Okay. So let's look at something and let's think about what our audience needs if we put our audience somewhere on this chart. If we put the audience right here, they're sympathetic, but they're misinformed. What could be the temptation for someone who wants them to be on their side? A speaker, a politician, a supervisor, a manager, I don't know, somebody making decisions and maybe wants the group to agree with the decision, right? If the group is sympathetic, they're like, we already agree with you, we're on your side. But if they're sympathetic because of the wrong information, you're on shaky ground. If they find the right information, they might change their attitude. Now, I think in relationships, this happens a lot, which is very important for you to be honest in your relationships if you want that thing to go long term, right? Because you might find someone that's very sympathetic, but they just don't know who you are. They're misinformed. They've got an idea of you that's not the real you. So those relationships tend to break down really quickly as you live life. Now, at this point, you got to kind of take the risk depending on the ethical situation, and you might really say, look, I'm before we go any further or before you donate the money, not nonprofits that are trying to raise money might need to sit back and say, look, do people really know what we're doing? Do they know where the money's going? Do they know whatever, right? Because if they have the wrong information and they think that your cause is bigger and better than it is, they might give you money. They might be sympathetic. But when they find out that you're not who you said you are, or your goals or your causes are a little different, or the money really isn't going there, it's going somewhere else, you're going to lose that support, and they're going to tell others too. So you got to be careful. It's much better to say at the beginning, hey, you got to have all the facts, and then you can decide whether to enroll into college or to take this career path. A lot of people in your situation are thinking about a career that they're sympathetic toward, but they have they're misinformed about what really is going on there, right? For example, we can go into a lot of this, but anyway, what about, I'm just gonna, how about this right here? So they're neutral, right? They're not either for or against it, and they're informed. Okay, so if that's your audience, you don't really have to give them the facts. They have the facts. Somehow they are misconnecting on the value of those facts. Somebody's mistaking here, because if those facts are valuable, this audience ought to be for them, right? Now, by valuable, I mean they're relevant, they're important. If they're important and you have the facts, you ought to use them in your life. You got to be incorporating that, right? And I don't want to say before it, but you got to honor and respect that, right? So if someone is informed but just doesn't care, well, I don't want to say that, right? Because I'm not saying they're apathetic. It's just they are neither for nor against at this point, but they have all the facts. It seems like sometimes there's a disconnect then, right? They don't maybe see the value of taking a position. Or listen, here's the deal. Well, you know it. we're human, so we're capable of all sorts of things that are not necessarily connected to our mental understanding of something. So someone might have all the facts and just be ornery, or just be lazy, or just honestly think it's they're checked out. Have you ever met someone that's kind of just checked out and just doesn't want to do life or whatever? At that point, their problems are of value and of energy and action are deeper. They might have an existential problem in terms of why do I want to ever act on this information that I have? Why do I want to click? Maybe they're very much informed that they have a horribly dirty house, and it's actually getting to the point where it might be unhealthy. But they're not doing anything about it. Well, they know it's dirty. They live there. The hygiene thing might be grounded, the apathetic, the neither for or against it, not acting on it, might be grounded on something else. And you might have to, instead of thinking that you're going to approach them directly head on about the issue, you might have to find what the deeper issue is. You have to forget about the surface level manifestation of it, and you might have to go looking for something much deeper and darker and hidden. Because if they're informed and they aren't sympathetic or hostile, somehow something is keeping them from actually thinking that their information is valuable or worth acting on, right? So now look, I think the best audience right here is the uninformed and the neutral, because once you give them the facts and the logic behind it, and if everything is set right and you've got truth on your side, they should very easily slip into this one, sympathetic, informed, right? The hardest group is hostile, informed. I'm going to put a big, that's supposed to be exclamation mark, then I circled it, but that's, they know all the facts, they know the logic, they know methodology, they know the definitions, they know what you believe, and they see it, right? And they are still against it. What are you going to do to change that, right? Is that group worth talking to? Because they have all the facts that you have. They're making all the connections that you're making. And whereas you are sympathetic towards this issue or whatnot, they're hostile. And there's a point there where words fail and negotiation breaks down, argumentation breaks down. I mean, at the end of the day, what is war but this, where the talking stops? There is no message anymore. And the last thing to do is one, ignore each other, or fight. And sometimes people think ignoring each other is not an option. So then you go to war. So and war scales. I mean, you could see this happening in neighborhoods, and you can see it happening in families, and you can see it happening in your state politics, and then you can see it happening in the war that we kind of know it. Well, there is a brutality to the final version of this where you actually have armies fighting, and it's almost its own category, but it's a result of this. Okay, so what if it's hostile and they're misinformed or uninformed? That's not so bad. At that point, don't take it personally. They're not really against you. Maybe they just don't have the facts. So now, hostile doesn't necessarily mean angry. Or it could be, but it could also just mean that they are not going to agree with you. They're not going to sign the papers. They're not going to let you do what you want to do. They're going to stop it, or they're not going to be involved. Or if you think it's yes, they think it's no. That's kind of what this means, against, if you will. Well, they might have that, but if they're just misinformed, then you realize that when you communicate with them, it should really be facts-based, because they don't have the facts or they have the wrong facts. Okay, so you can find an audience in each one of these grids, and you can think about what you have to deliver to them and how the rhetorical moment should be. Okay, now I had you read a short, dated. It's old. We're not going to talk about the actual facts of the matter because they're probably radically different now, but. Being Green at Ben and Jerry. Okay, there are rhetorical strategies that George F. Will is using there. Let's talk about that. One is the title. All right, the title Being Green at Ben and Jerry's. Uh, there's this sense that it is a creative title. It's a teaser, if you will. I mean, ice cream, the ice cream maker. What does this have to do with environmentalism? Kind of, it's a whole lot better than just titling it opinion piece or, environmentalism or whatever. By the way, you need to work on your titles too for the essays that you write for me. Don't just call it rhetorical analysis. Come up with the title. Be creative. Try to grab me, right? You got to create interest, maintain it, reward it, and you start with a good title. All right. A good title might take 5-10 minutes to write. You might have to start thinking about a title one day and then let it percolate in your head and roll around. And 2 days later, you come up with a great title. Many of us don't care enough to do that, but you should, because if you really are going to move forward with writing in real life, not just to pass a class and to get points, you got to learn how to capture an, an audience that is not obligated. Okay. They don't have to read your article. They don't have to look at your YouTube video. They don't have to listen to your song. They don't have to watch a short film. Why do you think they're going to watch it? What are you doing to capture their interest, first of all, right? What are you doing? What kind of pictures are you using? What kind of music? What kind of notes are you starting off with? What kind of title do you have up at the top? All right. So there's this. Okay. Then for Ben and Jerry, and then George F. Will gets very visual on you right away. That first paragraph is very easy for many people to understand. Right? He wants to make a point about how the drilling spot is really not much at all. So he asks you to do that big table. I mean, you do the math and you got this big table, square feet, aplenty. And on the little corner is a little circle the size of a dime. Okay. So a rhetorical strategy is to start off with something concrete and visual that will, bring the readers in. Then he gives you a little bit of Congress's shenanigans, right? About the debate gone wrong and the vote that was all about keeping the farmers' subsidies. Okay, you got a visual element. You got a sort of I don't know, what are we going to call this? A reveal, if you will, about what the vote was really about. Again, George F. Will is writing about a subject that a lot of people are going to find boring, frankly, and he's trying to make it interesting. Okay. Then once you're kind of invested in the article, he hits you with the math, right? It's like third or fourth paragraph, you get all this math, right? But in that math, which he's doing very fast, and I think the speed there, the pacing there is another rhetorical decision he made. But in the math, in that paragraph, you get a definition about energy. Now he couches it by saying there is no energy crisis, at least not as most people would define it. Fuel to drive the cars and to heat the houses. Okay, so you look at the definition he gives you, and he's using that to define any energy crisis. But if you step back and look at how the population uses the term, we use it in a much more essential way related to resources, natural resources, the amount of oil or solar power or well, in this case, it's going to be oil. And if it's shown that the reserves are shrinking and that the use is not also shrinking, then we do have an energy crisis. So he defines his term in a way that suits his argument. I'm not going to go another 7 minutes on this one, but that's a rhetorical strategy. Okay. Then when he gets to Clinton, and he talks about Clinton and the liberal group and how Clinton, the liberal group has donated to Clinton, and then Clinton turns around and puts our U.S. coal off limits. Again, this is like 15 years ago, so we're 20. Don't get all worked up about this right now, but that did happen. Okay, and when he put our coal, our cleanest burning coal, off limits, then all of a sudden we had to import coal in Lippo. We imported from Lippo, the Lippo group, and Lippo made a packet of money. So the idea there in that paragraph, I think is paragraph number 5, right, is that Bill Clinton staged this so that he could get a lot of campaign funds, right? But if you look at the actual article, nowhere in that article does George F. Will say that. He does not actually say that. He puts the dots out there and he encourages you to connect the dots, but he doesn't say that. It's all hypothetical. It's all maybe. It's all qualified. So he knows that there's no way anyone's going to be able to call him into court here, all right, for you know libel. He's not libeling Clinton. He's not saying anything there. You are thinking it because he's letting you draw the conclusion he never mentions. And think of how equally possible an alternate explanation is, because the one that you're presented there, I think again in the fifth paragraph, but you find the one about Clinton. The way it's presented there, because of its argumentative order, is that Clinton received campaign donations, and he realized they're from the liberal group. Then he turns around and puts our coal off limits because it's not clean enough. But Will says it's the America's cleanest burning coal. And then he orders imports from, or when I say he, we're talking about the agencies that would listen to the president. But anyway, imported fuel increases, and thus LIPO's fuel increases. Imports increase. In LIPO's case, it would be their exports, right? They're making money. They're making more money now because they're selling more coal to the United States, because Clinton put the coal off limits, our coal. And so they make more money, and then they give more to Clinton, right? But another explanation would be that America's cleanest burning coal is still dirty compared to the standards of the European coal market, okay? I don't know. I'm just saying this is a possible alternative explanation, because our cleanest burning coal, that doesn't mean that it's actually clean based on a higher standard. Like, it might be saying, like, let's just take our class. I know we're doing this online, but let's just say we all showed up in one room and we had a race. One of us is going to win, and so whoever that person is, we can call the class's fastest runner, But if we were to take our class's fastest runner and put them against the nation's best runners, you think that person's going to win? Well, I don't know. Maybe there's an Olympian in our class, but do you understand what I'm saying? That America's coal might still be awfully dirty. It's just our cleanest, but according to the European standard, maybe it's still very dirty. Okay, so maybe it really did need to be put off the market for a little bit. And then because that happened in its own right, we obviously imported more cleaner coal, and then that means that somebody out there sold it to us. And what if one of those somebodies out there, woke up 2 months later and they're like, wow, we made some great profits. What happened here? We increased our sale to the United States by 40% or 30%. That's incredible. What's going on? And then they look into it and like, oh, the president, Clinton did this. When did he do it? Oh, they didn't even know. They just discovered that they had made a lot of profit. And then they realized, well, this is why. And then they're like, well, let's keep that guy in office, And Clinton might not ever know them. He might never have had any sort of clandestine meeting with them at some, Middle Eastern party somewhere. They just sent him money because they can. And international funds might be under different jurisdiction, different laws concerning campaign donation. I don't know, but maybe it just happened as they made their own decision about trying to keep this president in, and they somehow figured out how to make a donation. Maybe they came and started a business here in America just for that, and then they gave to Clinton. And Clinton might be completely innocent here, That's a possible explanation. So, a rhetorical strategy that George F. Will is doing here is to present a scenario that could have two interpretations, but he sets it up so that one is more likely in the audience, to be received by the audience. So there's a lot of that stuff happening there, in that short essay, especially towards the end when he tries to gross you out, basically. Okay, now what's happening there? He's got a very powerful metaphor. That's rhetorical right there. The ability for that memory that metaphor to stick in your head about, the environmentalist that's eating a bowl of ice cream, and then, right next to the table is a big pound of manure, and under the table is a huge balloon of methane, because that's what the cow has to produce to get the gallons of milk that go into that ice cream bowl. All right, but so that's a very powerful visual metaphor. All right, and that's if you look at that and examine that you're looking at a rhetorical device. You see what I'm saying? And another rhetorical strategy that he's using here is hyperbole, because he's introducing the standard of, if you're a true environmentalist, you can't eat ice cream because ice cream has too big of a carbon footprint. Yeah, but I mean, just look at, does that also mean you can't go to the movies? Because the theater, in order to cool that big high room, or to heat it, depending where you are in the nation and the weather, but there's a lot of energy that goes under the heat that's produced by that lamp that's projecting the screen, and there's a lot of energy used in a movie theater. You can't go to a movie theater? What about just driving a car? Can you drive a car? The standard that he introduces there is actually, when you think about it, is way too high. That's not fair. Okay? And yet he uses it because of the power of that visual metaphor. Now, he does something very interesting here. He doesn't take credit for that metaphor. If you look in that last paragraph, he says that it's coming from Zinsmeister or something. What a last name, right? But Zinsmeister. And he's very careful to say this is not my metaphor, because he's protecting himself from potential backlash from people that might actually think through what he's saying and say, no, that's not any good. So as a columnist, usually he's writing opinion pieces about issues that people care about. And as a columnist gets a following, usually these people become sympathetic to him, right? And because they're sympathetic, they might let him get away with some of this junk, right? Because they just like the fact that they have someone as talented as George F. Will on their side. And when he's syndicated in so many national outlets, it feels like you're part of a winning team, okay, because you like George F. Will. So it would be good for you that are kind of interested in following this, and to go and Google George F. Will and see how many awards he's won. Okay, the guy's a master at producing 1,000-word pieces that make an impact, because not only does he know how to work the facts the way he wants to work them, but he also is able to incorporate rhetorical devices, right, in the presentation that really are effective for his audience. He knows who his audience is, and he knows what to do with that. Now, what you have to do here for this assignment is you have to go and examine, Super Bowl commercials, and I want you to watch the 10 that I pick, and then you can go watch others, okay? And then I want you to try to make categories, if you will. You don't have to try to find the rhetorical devices for all the Super Bowl commercials, but if you can put together a small group of, say, the funny ones that use silence, or the funny ones that use physical humor, or the ultra patriotic ones, or I don't know. I mean, try to find. I start you off with 10, but if you just Google Super Bowl commercials, you can find hundreds of them. Okay, and what I want you to do is collect a small group, and see if in that group they're sharing similar rhetorical devices. It could be humor, it could be I don't know. It could be silence. Okay, so in the last, I think February 2025, one of the Super Bowl commercials was some mascot for a toilet paper company, and they left the screen, and they stayed off the screen for like 25 seconds, and they were taking a bathroom break. Okay, so that's a rhetorical use of silence, of absence, and people remember that. Now, no one liked the commercial because we were all thinking, you paid $6 million, and this is it. Okay, this is it. Come on. But yet it was sticky as far as its ability to stay in your memory because of the audacity of the thing. But a lot of people thought it was actually dumb, right? But you remember it because of the dumb. So maybe that backfired on them. I don't remember if it was a Super Bowl commercial or not. I think it was, but maybe in 2024 there was just a URL, a QR square. The squares that you can snap with your phone, and it takes you to a website, and the QR square was just bouncing up on the screen. moving around, or that would have made it hard to photograph, right? Maybe it was just sitting there. I don't know. But so this notion of we've got a secret, you don't know what this is. Just take a picture and you'll see. Um, they were hoping that device that would, so the curiosity was being used there, right? Now you can go in and you can find some stuff that make you feel very witty, like they're funny but they're witty. So that's more of an intellectual humor. Sometimes the humor is dumb, and it's more of a like, okay, if you can just watch the What's Up commercials by Budweiser, what's up, go, you can find the derivatives of that. But I mean, what I mean is that there was one big hit, and then there were sequels to this because it was such a funny commercial. It was so fun to imitate. So fun to imitate. And they did it again with frogs. You go look at the Budweiser frog commercial, and people started imitating the frogs. So maybe you put together a small group of commercials that really the rhetorical device is, we're going to put sort of a brain worm in you, and you're gonna act this out with your friends because it's just funny and cool. That was my email. So what I'm saying to you is, I'm going to start you off watching a collection of Super Bowl commercials. Then you can go watch some more. You can put your own collection together and tell me what's the main rhetorical device that group of 3, 4, or 5. I'd say 3 would be the minimum, but why don't we go 5? 3 to 5. What's the main rhetorical device that they're all sharing? They're all doing, okay? And it could be a song. Okay, so if you want to see something really cool, go and find the commercial that is for, I think it's Discover, and it's the commercial that goes, the world is a beautiful place. They're singing the song, what a beautiful world. Okay, so I think if you just type in a Discover Channel beautiful world song, you'll find the commercial, and the song is so catchy, and the visuals are so inspiring that a lot of people were singing the song after the commercial. So maybe the song is the rhetorical device, and the way that it's easy to remember, or the way the visuals accentuated it, or whatever, emphasized it. I don't know. You have fun with this, and go and find. Sometimes you can find one main rhetorical device, and there's another one wrapped up in it too, as well. So that that would be good too if you find something like that. But that's basically our assignment. And now, this video is the main instructional tool for that. I'm going to have one more thing for you to watch, okay, or listen to, and that's Garrison Keillor's Lake Woebegone, a small Lake Woebegone episode, about 15 minutes, where he talks about his calling as a prophet and how he refused to be a prophet. And he does something in the video, right? He does something in not the video, the recording, that is a rhetorical device. Okay, one, he's obviously using humor, and he's got this deep voice, and he's pacing his speech. He's using pacing to disarm the audience, right? But then he says something extremely controversial, potentially extremely controversial, in two ways. One is our national policy of war when we were at war in the Middle East, and the other one is his belief in God. Now, many people believe in God, but it's one of those issues where this modern age kind of lets you decide whether you want to believe in God or not, but Keillor comes out and says God is angry at this. And how did he do it? So that at the end, the audience was laughing. He moved it away from himself, right? And he has this negative speech. In other words, he tells you what he wants to tell you by saying that it's coming from someone else's voice, if you will, or he's basically saying, this is what I wouldn't tell you. Okay, I'm not going to tell you, and then he goes and he tells you. So there's a very interesting negative or reversal move, and he has to have this story to allow him to do this, and he completely disarms his audience. He brings them here, where potentially they could have been hostile. They're all informed about this. They're all informed about the war in Iraq. But because of his humor in the story lets him introduce a persona that is him, but not him at the same time. And the not him version actually delivers this very harsh message. And the audience can appreciate that. And they do not get angry or upset at Keillor himself. Okay, so you have to listen to that. You have to invest the time to do this. Don't take shortcuts here. Go listen to that thing. Do something while you listen to it that will still let you pay attention to it. Okay, but that's your preparation for this. Okay, the video here, you've already read Being Green at Ben and Jerry. I just talked about it. Now I want you to listen to the prophet, the clip. All right, then go get busy with those Super Bowl commercials. Okay, now there is a website I want you to look at. So there's going to be a link where you go and you try to see what people have written about rhetorical analysis. And then if there is something in your book, in your textbook, your handbook, I'll have that as reading material for you as well. Hey, thank you so much for watching the video.